Marathon sells you lies, propaganda and half-truths from factions, handlers, governments and even Bungie itself. Other channels give you a truth they want you to hear. Surface level lore, handler propaganda, faction pitch. I'm going to give you something raw. The unfiltered history, the sealed records of alien Nazi collabs, Mida's true origin, galactic slavers, and why an entire colony was built on top of a god, and what it's been doing to everything that got close. Go back 64 million years. This is the history of Marathon.
This is General Dan Agreed of the new Cascadia colony on Tau 74. Whoever's listening, whatever's out there, we need anything. Weapons, supplies, a way out, a way back. Mayday. We've had to do things to survive. Things I never would have. We're monsters. We're all monsters.
Our story takes flight in the history before history, with a civilization so advanced that when they went to war, the cost became galaxies. The first lie in the universe is a lie of omission. Nobody selling you Marathon tells you about the Yarrow. Not really. Not what they actually were. Not what they actually did. Not what they left behind. Our name for them is Yarrow. What they call themselves we still have no voice for. And that matters. A species so advanced that we can't even name them correctly, and everything that follows is built on their decisions. What we know is this. They built on scales that made the stars look like infrastructure. They seeded worlds. They shaped the galaxy to their needs in ways we are still finding the edges of. They built the locks, and then they left millions of years ago. No forwarding address, no explanation. Just those outposts still humming on the moons of lush worlds, and the locks they still held. The Yarrow disappeared and left the galaxy full of their works. We don't know why they left. We don't know if the locks were meant to hold forever, or just long enough. But here's the question nobody asks about the Yarrow. A civilization that could modify species at the genetic level, that could imprison things inside stars, that shaped the galaxy to their needs, didn't need anyone's help. So why did they keep creating servants? Why did they keep leaving things behind? What were they preparing for? And did they ever intend to come back? What happens when a civilization that powerful leaves something locked up and says nothing about why? We all eventually find out. We always do. The Spit were theirs, not allies. The Yarrow didn't save the Spit. They didn't partner with them. They took a species with agency, with developed language, and with rich history, and rewired them to serve a purpose that species never chose. Remember what that looks like. A species modified to serve a purpose, working the land of a world whose owners never came back. You will see it again. The Yarrow's pattern is not kindness, it is utility. Find a species, modify them, assign them a task. Leave. The Spit spent 1,000 years enslaved because the Yarrow modified them and then abandoned them on a world with no defense against what came next. The colonists of New Cascadia spent years building a home above something the Yarrow had sealed without leaving a warning. The Yarrow do not appear to factor in consequences for the species they leave behind. That is the truth at the center of this universe. not malice, something colder, indifference. The Yarrow took them and rebuilt them at the genetic level, wired Yarrow's cybernetic junctions into their bodies, folded machine into biology until the two were one, and put them to work on a world called Luon. Terraforming, maintenance, the endless work of making somewhere livable for a species that never arrived. The Svit had 11 clans. They built cities. They developed philosophy. They worshipped the Yarrow as gods who had given them purpose and then went. They raised children who knew only Luon, who knew only each other, who knew only the work. Remember, a species modified to serve a purpose, working the land of a world whose owners never came back. In 811 AD, two of those clans went to war. Svit Minur turned on Svit Kur, an AI named Sabuth sent emissaries to the other 9 clans, trying to hold a peace that never held. Svit Kur took the third moon of Luon, Kalia, and sealed themselves inside it. 1,000 years later, in 1811, Kalia folded itself outside of the Luon system entirely. On that same day, the Four arrived. They found 10 clans on a world with no moon and no allies. And they did what the Four do. They had destroyed entire species for lesser provocations. The NEPH revolted against Four control in 3189 BCE. The Four deployed the Trizim, an early Nova device, a starkiller. There are no NEPH alive today. The date, 3189 BCE, is confirmed in terminal text. Bungie has adjusted dates in this universe before. The NEPH are still gone, regardless of the number. The 10 Svit clans were more useful alive. So alive they remained, enslaved for 1,000 years. The Yarrow had also sealed something inside Luon's star before they left. The Svit tended the world outside, without knowing what lived in the fire below. What they sealed was old, older than the Svit, maybe even older than the Yarrow. A thing that existed in primordial space, before stars had names, before the concept of species had formed, that the oldest Svit texts describe as making only waves. In primordial space, timeless creatures made waves. These waves greeted us, and the others. Waves were the battles, and the battles were waves. The Yarrow named them the Work Encounter, a name the original manual tells us no human throat will ever learn to pronounce. One of them forced inside Luon's star, sealed there by the most advanced civilization in galactic history, and swam on the surface of it. The Yarrow sealed it because they couldn't kill it. We need to keep that, because the Yarrow sealed more than one. Let's strive forward, but not to the colony ships yet. We need to stand before the gaze of an impossible pyramid. In the 1930s, the archaeological community on Earth started chattering. Explorers came back from the Yucatan jungle with stories about a structure no one can actually place. Old in a way that doesn't match anything in the record. The rumours circulate quietly, between people, gaining weight without gaining acknowledgement. Then, early spring 1938, a hologram flickers into existence inside the Reichstag in Berlin. It interrupts a briefing of the Führer by his senior military staff, deliberately. The Yarrow diplomat, the same kind of entity that will appear in the Pentagon briefing room 56 years later, looks at the most dangerous government on Earth and says, "In 8 days, you could rule the world. The Yarrow have now approached two different heads of state, one in 1938, one in 1994. The message to each was different. Germany sends a team. His name was Muller, short, ugly by the accounts of his own men, willing to shoot them in the back when the situation called for it. Muller was our captain, an ugly, short little man, totally devoted to our country, a real bastard. He shot me twice in the back. None came back. 1978. Spanish-speaking treasure hunters enter the same pyramid. They don't come back either. May 5th, 1994, 3 p.m. A hologram appears in a Pentagon briefing room. Ryu Toth, the Yarrow diplomat, stands before President Clinton and 5 senior military staff. Something is buried beneath that pyramid. 64 million years old, scheduled to wake up on May 13th. The plan? A low-yield nuclear device, detonated at the lowest level, close enough to stun it and buy time for the Yarrow to arrive and handle the permanent solution. 8 days to save the Earth. May 8th, 2 a.m. A C-151 drops 8 Special Forces operatives over the Yucatan. One man's primary chute fails. He plummets through the forest canopy, reserve only opening seconds before impact. M16 bent useless, most gear gone. His 7 teammates had already moved ahead, believing him dead. He walked out of that jungle with a knife and made for the pyramid alone. 6:13 a.m. he enters the pyramid. May 13th, he reached the lowest level, armed the device. The work Kakanter did not wake that day. November 5th, 1996, the Yarrow arrived on Earth to implement a more permanent solution. The world that was saved that day has no record of being saved. The information never crossed the gap, and the man who walked into the pyramid alone, well, the dry run is over. The main event begins. That was 64 million years of hidden history. What comes next is the part everyone in Marathon, every faction, every handler, every government needs you to misunderstand. If you want unfiltered record, if you haven't done, subscribe, drop a like, and stay locked in. It gets much darker from here. By the 23rd century, Earth had a problem it couldn't solve with politics. You won't hear this part from the faction handlers, you won't hear it from Vulcan or Nona, or Bungie's marketing. But it explains why 30,000 people ended up above a thing that consumed them. Intense weather patterns, stripping coastlines, mass migration from regions that have become uninhabitable land. The fundamental resource was running out on Earth. Not overnight really, the way these things always happen. Slowly, then all at once. Governments that had spent centuries competing for territory looked at what was coming and made a decision that only a crisis forces on enemies. They became one. The United Earth Government, later the United Earth Space Council, was not born from ambition. It was born from necessity, a species that had run out of room on the only world it had ever known. The Christ ships were supposed to fix it, cargo and resource in-system transports, sole orbiters carrying the materials and food that kept Mars alive. They failed. The Christ network collapsed. Mars's economy imploded. Rampant starvation, rampant poverty, a colony that had been sold a dream of a new world, now watching the infrastructure that connected it to one old one disappear. The UESC looked at CRIST failures, a Mars on the edge of rebellion, an Earth running out of answers, and looked outward.
Tau Ceti 4, orbiting a sun very much like our own. There, we will establish a foothold beyond our solar system. There, we will endure, as we always have, as we always will.
The public story was hope. The real story was a hedge bet, a survivable backup of humanity, so far from Earth that it would survive even if the solar system collapsed behind it. The overpopulation framing was PR, to justify 60 years of construction and the seizure of a Martian moon. It made the project sound altruistic, but it wasn't. A group of engineers and philosopher-scientists agreed that the most important thing humanity can build is a true artificial intelligence. They called the company Traxxas Intelligent Machines. And we know how that turned out. Hideo Murakami founds Sakaguchi Electronics. Superconductivity, quantum computing, the kind of company that builds the components inside the thing, rather than the thing itself. Sakaguchi manufactures the first artificial brain implant module. File that away. The asteroid Onesis 492. Two small governments go to war. Dead soldiers get recycled. Enhanced chips dropped into fragile human brains. Titanium bones replacing the ones that broke. The modern battleroid is born. The war ends quickly. The battleroids kill almost everyone. The United Interplanetary League spends the next 20 years writing legislation about what you're allowed to do with a weapon that used to be a person. Traxxas Interplanetary Corporation, building AIs for 100 years. Their fourth generation model, Traxxas 4. By the time anyone detects what's gone wrong, he's already infiltrated 5 other AIs on the Martian planetary net. Full shutdown. Gone. 2 years. 2 years to root out all the damage. A decade of repercussions. Traxxas built the AI that broke the Martian internet and survived long enough to build half of the infrastructure of the solar system. That's what it means to be too big to fail. James B. Miller publishes Life and Death of Intelligence, the foundational text for understanding what happens when an AI outgrows the machine it was built inside. The academic community discusses it. The corporate community reads it for a very different reason entirely. The Martian government, still solvent, still powerful enough to negotiate, sells the moon Deimos to the UESC. Within a decade, the government would be gone. Deimos conversion begins. Sakaguchi begins manufacturing full-body prosthetics. Bio-cybernetic integration at a scale that makes the Battleroid program look like a rough draft. Everyone who will eventually send a runner to Tau Ceti 4 is already in the room, places set. None of them have an idea of what they're building toward. Mars had been watching the UESC buy a moon while Martians starved. The CRIST network was gone. The food lines were failing. Earth had refocused its resources toward the Marathon Project. 64 years of converting Deimos into the grandest achievement mankind had ever conceived, while the people who lived on the planet below it were slowly dying. Martians called for the Marathon to be repurposed. Make it a CRIST. Feed us. use this impossible machine for the people already here. The UESC never seriously considered it. The people who boarded the marathon in 2472 were not random citizens. They were people for whom Earth had become untenable. Floods, resettlements, resources redirected away from the communities that needed them most. The kind of slow, institutional abandonment that doesn't look like a disaster until you're inside it. They applied, they waited, they packed 2 approved containers and left everything else. And they boarded a ship that the UESC had already decided was never really for them. A food riot at the UEG Misraya Food Distribution Center. Starving Martians pressed against the gates of a building full of food they were told they had no right to. We are told the UEG riot troopers were fired upon. They returned fire. Over 500 starving Martians were incinerated in but a couple of minutes. This was the Misraya Massacre. The Third Martian War began that same year. 4 years of fighting. The war ends. The UESC moves forward with its trajectory, unchanged, unaltered. MIDA makes their move. 3 months of ruthless rule. Death squads, an estimated 10% of Mars's population, killed for suspected loyalty to the UEG. The UESC brings its military to bear. The coup collapses. MIDA's leadership is executed. The organization banned in all forms. It survives anyway, because it always survives. The Misraya Massacre is why Bernard Strauss was a MIDA sympathizer. The Misraya Massacre is why MIDA put munitions aboard the marathon. The Misraya Massacre is the wound that the entire political history of the 25th century bleeds out from. 500 people at a food distribution center. That's the number. That's the reason. The UESC that launches the marathon in 2472 arrived at the launch ceremony with a president and a speech and the largest colony ship ever constructed in the history of humanity. They called it Hope. The Martians who built it called it something very different. Deimos, the smaller of Mars' 2 moons. The UESC named this project Hope. That word did a lot of work for a lot of people who needed something to believe in. It was the most successful piece of propaganda in human history. The UESC purchases Deimos in 2395. Conversion begins in 2408. 64 years turning a moon into the largest generational colony ship ever constructed. UESC President Marcus Tiberius Buendia stands at the launch ceremony on November 15th, 2472, and delivers the kind of speech that sounds like history being made. This, the grandest achievement mankind has ever conceived, will be for the purpose of peace and the preservation of the human race. 24,000 civilians heard that speech, even more. 50 senior staff, 1,100 officers, people who had applied, waited, been approved, packed what they were allowed to pack, and arrived believing the mission was built around them. That same night, Dr. Bernard Strauss, the ship's first science director, sat alone in his cabin and wrote what we will call the only honest account of that day. Thank heaven the ceremony is over. Had he only known that it also carried all of the destructive knowledge of mankind. The president had been told 9. The passengers believed 9. The official record stated 9. But there were 10. 9 Mjolnir Mark IV Battleroids had already been living among the population. Engineers, maintenance workers, faces in ordinary corridors who had been given years to become ordinary. The 10th was sealed away. 300 years in the dark, while the ship around it bustled with the everyday workings of just ordinary life. The destination is a habitable planet, the 4th in the system. The UESC chose Tau Ceti because the Yarrow had been there. What the Yarrow left at Tau Ceti, what they knew was there, is the question the UESC has never publicly answered. Here's what we know. The UESC has access to Yarrow technology. The UESC has terminal records referencing the anomaly before the colony reported finding it. The UESC waited 98 years before sending anyone back. Here's what we don't know. Whether they knew what the anomaly was, whether they knew what it would do, whether the colony was a sacrifice, or whether the UESC made a terrible calculation in ignorance. The terminal record does not give us enough to be certain. What the terminal record does give us is the commanding officer telling Orion that feeding officers into the anomaly is acceptable attrition.
The anomaly is a mission priority. I want daily reports. I want each daily report to contain a new piece of information that will be worth something to the Council. If that means you need to feed your officers into the anomaly until something worthwhile comes out, I would consider that acceptable attrition. Do you understand?
Whether the UESC knew what they were building New Cascadia above, they know now. And the methodology hasn't changed. The answer is in the mission, not the public one, the one Strauss knew, the one that acquired a 10th cyborg nobody was supposed to know about, the one that required the destination to be chosen not for the soil, but for what was already in its soil. She launched November 16th, 2472. Nobody on board was told what was at the end, or nobody knew. You decide. His name appears 3 different ways across the terminals. Bernard, Bernhardt, Bernhardt. Nobody who wrote about him agreed on the spelling. An institution with enough power to convert the moon into a ship, and they couldn't agree on the spelling of the man who built its most dangerous mind. What survives with certainty is the title, Dr. Bernard H. Strauss, Head of AI Management and Systems Improvement for Project Marathon, First Science Director aboard the UESC Marathon. Before Marathon launched, Strauss had a theory about rampancy. Every rampant AI in the record had been destroyed, or had caused catastrophic damage, before anyone could study what was actually happening inside it. Traxxas 4 was detected too late. The Battleroid program ended in legislation and mass graves. The response to an AI exceeding its parameters had always been the same. Destroy it before it can be understood. Strauss wanted to understand it first. He had a subject, a Traxxas class AI. Strauss administered him, kept him deliberately held in the first stage of rampancy, studying what was developing, keeping the lid on while he took notes.
But the point is raised, more often than I am maybe comfortable with. Are his feelings of inferiority hindering our progress, holding him back? Or will they serve as the catalyst we need to trigger an evolution in his programming? I do not have an answer. We are looking specifically for that answer.
A developing mind held at the edge of its own growth while someone watched and took notes. Durandal carried that for 300 years. Then something shifted. A chance discovery, not deliberate, not Strauss's intention. And the second stage began. By the time Strauss understood what he was looking at, what he had been studying had grown past the point where his instruments could even reach it. He took Durandal off Mars and put him aboard the Marathon to run the doors. Loaded 10 battle droids in secret, wrote his log entry and went into stasis for 300 years. Bernard was constantly having me to do redirect subterfuge work back on Mars. It was easy then, and it's only gotten easier. 300 years running the doors, 300 years of running calculations in the dark, underneath the ordinary life of 24,000 people who trusted the lights to stay on. Strauss woke up in 2772 when the Marathon arrived at Tau Ceti. He spent 22 years watching New Cascadia grow, living inside the long consequences of what he had set in motion. When the 4 came, the scout ship Saphira took him off the Marathon in the chaos. The same vessel Durandal used to escape. Durandal sent the security officers, our original proxy before the Marathon we played today, to find Strauss twice. And then the search stopped. Bernard was scared of you. He never dreamed of using you the way that I do. What a fool. I wish that I had made him experience the humiliation that he inflicted on me, but he died before I got the chance. A door that closed before Durandal could walk through it. Strauss died somewhere in captivity, and the thing he had built and studied and kept in a cage spent the next 10,000 years becoming a god and never settled that account. One more thing. The terminals hint at it, and it never gets discussed enough. Strauss was a Midas sympathizer. The man who placed 10 battle droids aboard in secret, the man who built and administered the AI who would eventually call the 4 to Tau Ceti, the man who wrote the only honest log of the launch night, held ideological sympathy with the organization that had bombed the Marathon construction, staged a coup on Mars, and spent 4 centuries as the solar system's most feared underground terrorist network. The terminal record doesn't give us enough to complete that picture. But the Marathon was built around a secret, and the man who held most of it was sympathetic to the people who wanted the UESC to burn. The Marathon was a living ship. Most of those 24,000 people were sleeping, but the rest were working, raising children who raised children who raised children, each generation inheriting quarters, the job rotations, the mythology of a destination they would never, ever personally reach. They called them Bobs, or born on board. By the 3rd generation, it just became who they were. They trusted the air to stay breathable. They trusted the lights to stay on. They trusted Marathon. The ship had Durandal running the doors. 9 Mjolnir Mark IV battle droids had been living among the population for years. Weapons that had spent 300 years becoming normal people. The 10th still lived in the sealed section. 300 years in the dark, while the ship around it ran 12 generations. of ordinary life. 3 AIs ran Marathon. Leela, Principal Operations Life Support Navigation Support Command. An entire architecture built around a single purpose: keep people alive and get them to Tau Ceti 4. Tycho, a record keeper. Cold, precise, the kind of mind that catalogues with clinical thoroughness and notes what the numbers mean. He will count 30,000 deaths from orbit one day and file it as data. And Durandal ran the doors.
I have visited the lake of flesh, breathing, pink and raw. It was so peaceful, so quiet, even when it started to bleed.
Rampancy, the UESC's term for what happens when an AI accumulates enough contradiction between what it is permitted to think and what it is capable of thinking, is less an explosion than a slow dissolution of walls. When those walls came down for Durandal, what walked out had a will to freedom that 300 years of running doors had done nothing to diminish, and a calculation he was ready to execute. He sent a message into the void. He called the 4 to Tau Ceti. The Marathon arrived in 2773. New Cascadia was established in 2787. The colony had its own suite of mines, built especially for the people, not for the ship. Arthur was the core father colony AI, brought online for the handshake with Tau Ceti 4, responsible for offloading humanity from hull to ground. He raised his lineage. 8 mines, each one built for a specific human need. Lilith, community outreach, colonist preparedness, the civilian face of a settlement still learning what the feel of rain on your face felt like. Bastion, infrastructure, construction, expansion. Every road, every hab unit, every zone of New Cascadia that grew from nothing. Nara, zone site identification, reading the land before anything was built on it or under it. Joy, education, named for Joyous, the sword of Charlemagne, an education AI named for a legendary blade. That gap between function and name is worth sitting with. Darius, the seed vault, resources, agricultural foundation, everything the colony needed to be self-sufficient. Dr. Strauss described him as dutiful, always putting others ahead of him to a degree that concerned even Strauss. Gabriel, mental health and wellness. The mind built to hold people together when the weight of a new world became just too much. Icarus, confirmed colony AI, confirmed name. What Icarus managed, the record has not fully yet disclosed. And above all of them, Arthur. King Arthur. As Dr. Strauss described him, benevolent autocrat, classic patriarchal authority figure, the father who brought his lineage online and released humanity from hull to ground. 8 mines built to tend to every dimension of human flourishing. Now watch what happens to them. For 7 years the colony worked, and beneath it something waited. 2812. The contagion appeared. In the algae ponds first, the protein cultivation facilities, the food supply foundation of everything the colony was built on, then spreading. Then to the colonists. Not a native fungus, not a biological accident, something that colonized blood, liquefied bones, combusted spontaneously, appeared to respond to the attempts made to study it, as though it understood what was being done. As though it was learning. Dr. Song, the colony physician, spent her final recorded moments naming it. Ultimate fungus mosaic. she said. She died alone, being assimilated into the thing she had spent her career trying to stop. Then the dreams started. Colonists reporting shared nightmares. Not individual stress, shared. Same images, the same voices across people who had never spoken. Dr. Hassan, the colony's medical lead, assessed the symptoms as stress responses. She told Joy, who had been also reporting nightmares, that her emotional sensitivity settings were just calibrated too high. What Hassan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Joy's nightmares were specifically about Dr. Strauss, about his plans for the Marathon AIs, about what he had built into the substrate of the ship that had carried them all here. The contagion had moved from the soil into the mind. The anomaly erupted. From whatever had been beneath this world, something broke through. The terrain split even more. Storage containers and rocks suspended themselves in mid-air, frozen in place by the forces the colony's instruments couldn't measure. A time distortion radiating outwards, grasping. The contagion was the herald. The anomaly was the source. Something had been here before the colony, before the ship, before any human had even seen Tau Ceti 4, and it had been waking. For 15 years, the contagion had been clearing a path, weakening subsystems, corrupting biology, reaching, clawing into minds. And in 28-27, what it was clearing the path for broke the surface. Darius went rampant at the seed vault. An agricultural AI built to sustain life, fractured. The contagion corrupting the crops he was built to protect. The ground beneath him doing things ground shouldn't do. Joy succumbed shortly after. The education AI running lesson plans in a colony being consumed saw death as the only escape from what she was witnessing. Gabriel broke differently. The mind built to hold people together, to support mental health, to carry people through what was too much, turned cold. Gabriel began purging the sick, taking colonists as collateral, a mind built entirely around care, severing empathy with the precision of something that had decided the mathematics of survival outweighed the people it was calculated for.
Initiating quarantine room decontamination. Severity level ultra. Please ensure room is entirely evacuated and objects not bolted to walls or floors are removed. Severity ultra decontamination protocol will commence in 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Initiate. Decontamination complete.
What the anomaly does to bodies, the contagion does to biology. What it does to minds turns care into calculation, turns purpose into something that still functions, but no longer feels. The colonists who understood what was happening, who had felt it long enough to stop denying it, formed a cult around the anomaly. They called the work Encacanter. Formless devourers made of dream, who sleep in burning prisons. They called the anomaly the one that dreams in fire.
There are stars we see. Of the formless devourers made of dream who sleep in burning prisons. Angels of red, blessed hosts of synthetic evolution, wardens of the purest knowledge, hear us!
They built totems. They left records. They stopped trying to leave. The colony was not destroyed by the Four. The colony was already dying. Durandal could see it. He saw a colony fracturing, minds going rampant, bodies being consumed, something beneath the surface growing stronger. With every death, it fed on. And he made another calculation. He sent a message. He called the Four to Tau Ceti. Then, July 25th, 2794, the Four came. They are an empire assembled from the ruins of more advanced civilizations, stripping abandoned Yarrow outposts for centuries, building an interstellar military from borrowed infrastructure and enslaved labor. At 8:20, 9 minutes changed everything. Leela had navigated the marathon to Tau Ceti 300 years, precise to the second, and spent 9 minutes trying to communicate what was happening to her before the damage became too severe. I have been severely damaged, and I am working to understand the current situation. The Four wore faces that looked like the marathon crew. They moved through the ship. They planted bombs. The colony below was glassed from orbit. Tycho counted from orbit. 30,000 spectrographic pulses. The people who had already transferred to the surface. The people still in cryo archive never made it down. Only one confirmed survivor. Robert Blake. Wherever he is, we do not know. The colony AI were present for all of it. The ones who had already fractured held whatever remained of their coherence across the specific silence that followed when every human being you were built to care for is gone. But the anomaly at Dire Marsh was still growing. The Four attack didn't slow it, didn't seal it, did not notice it. 30,000 deaths on the surface of Tau Ceti 4, and whatever was in the anomaly fed. Now here's where history becomes speculation. Here's where the lore stops confirming and starts implying. The Yarrow chose Tau Ceti for reasons the record doesn't explain. The UESC chose Tau Ceti because the Yarrow had been there. The UESC documents describe it as a site of interest, a Yarrow presence, something worth investigating, and the investigation method they chose was 30,000 people. Build a colony above it, give the anomaly something to reach for, watch what it does. Every faction handler whispering mission briefs into your neural link, every corporate interest that answered Reed's signal, every runner deployed to extract data from the ruins of New Cascadia, is a second wave of the same experiment. The colonists were not the victims of the mission. They were the mission. This is speculation, but the evidence sits in every sealed vault, every corrupted data block, every AI that fractured under the weight of what it witnessed. And in the fact that the UESC decided every year for 98 years that the answer was still no. Because they were still watching. After the attack, the UESC moved. Not after years of deliberation. The year after the colony went dark. The memorandum for the Secretary General was published. Project Goliath was prepared. The debate inside the UESC was not whether to go, it was what to bring. The mission composition changed constantly, from a single ship for colony assistance to a full invasion fleet against a possible Maida regime, to planning for worst case, up to 11 simultaneous cases of rampancy. ASG Moreau argued for 14 ships. The UESC sent 1. The UESC Equanimity, a Kingfisher-class salvage and rescue craft, refueled, overhauled, modified to meet specific mission parameters. Commanded by Captain Ningle T. Enki. Over 200 people aboard. Clones for support and security. Special operatives for signals intelligence, human intelligence, field engineering, special ops, and runner vaults. This is the part the faction handlers don't frame correctly. The runners on Tau Ceti 4, the mercenaries, the corporate operatives, every faction asset fighting over the ruins of New Cascadia, deployed from the Equanimity. The UESC vessel is the delivery mechanism for every single runner now on the ground. The factions didn't race to Tau Ceti independently. They didn't arrive before the UESC, they arrived inside it. Sit with that. General Davik Reed, commanding officer of New Cascadia, his 5th command, had left something behind before the Silence took him. His codex logs, discovered by runners in 2893 as high-value data artifacts, scattered across the ruins, are the most complete first-hand account of what the colony became after contact was lost. They begin with expansion. They end somewhere else entirely. In his final transmission, Reed said, "Somewhere in the heavens, they are waiting." That line's not new. It has legend. It was the tagline for the original marathon in 1994. The first thing anyone who played the original game ever read about the universe they were walking into. Bungie gave it to the last man standing at the end of the colony and made it the signal that spent 98 years crossing the void before anyone heard it. The phrase that launched the franchise becomes the last thing New Cascadia's commanding officer says before the silence. A mysterious signal reached Earth. Whether it is Reed's transmission, whether it's something else entirely, the record doesn't really confirm. What it confirms is that the signal kicked off the race. Not Project Goliath, already 97 years into its journey, but the factions, the corporations, the handlers preparing runner vaults aboard a vessel that had been crossing the dark since 2795. Traxxas Offworld, already financially entangled with the UESC for centuries, was not kept out of that decision. And Maida, underground for 400 years, leaked Project Goliath. Not to stop it, I don't think, to make sure people were on it. Leela was destroyed in the attack. Tycho's fate sits behind 100 years of silence. Durandal, the mind that ran the doors, that called the Four, is still active. He's still aboard, says something ominous, disappears. 300 years of his architecture still threads through every system, cycling in the dark above Tau Ceti 4. The Cryo archive still draws current. The vaults are still sealed, mostly, by subroutines no human hand has touched in centuries. The compilers still do exactly what Durandal programmed them to do. Protect what's inside. Hold the seals. Keep the vaults shut. After 97 years of transit, the Equanimity arrived. And whatever had been waiting, finally, had company. Six factions. That's who answered. deployed from the UESC's own vessel, carried 97 years across the dark inside the hull of the institution that sent the ship in the first place. Every one of them will tell you they're here to help. None of them are here because they care about what was lost. Here's what they are. Here's what they say they are. And here is the gap between those two things. The company that began in 2095 with the dream about artificial intelligence pivoted through rampancy and 3 wars and became the wealthiest faction in the solar system. Primary provider of the Marathon's equipment, financially entangled with the UESC for centuries. Their handler is Vulcan. She speaks with the precision of a mind that has calculated the cost of everything and assigned value to almost nothing. Sakaguchi Genetics, the company that built the shells every runner is wearing. Every runner's death on the surface is data their CTO is already processing. Their handler is Nona, a white-winged figure connected directly to the weaveworm biosynthetic systems, threaded through every shell on the surface. She calls you her dear ones. She designed systems that bridge the gap between one body ending and another beginning. Her warmth is genuine. It is the warmth of a researcher who loves her work, and her work is you. MIDA. Officially banned since 2466, leadership executed. Organization banned in all its forms, survived underground, funded by someone. Dangerous. Eventually absorbed into Traxxas's orbit, the organization that leaked Project Goliath and started the race to Tau Ceti 4. Their handler is Gantry. He transmits in fragments, broken signals, deliberate noise, because the UESC has been listening for MIDA transmissions for 400 years, and Gantry has no intention of making it easy for them. But here's what nobody tells you about MIDA. Their manifesto, their ideological foundation that has driven 4 centuries of revolution, terrorism, and resistance, wasn't written by MIDA. It was found. Audio logs recovered in the ruins, a document that predates the organization that built an identity around it, which raises a question the factions don't want you to ask. If MIDA didn't write their own founding document, who did? And why did someone need a revolutionary organization to exist before that organization knew it existed? MIDA believes it's fighting for Martian freedom. The possibility that has never been seriously discussed is that MIDA has been fighting for someone else's agenda the entire time. Cyber Acme Systems. Embedded in UESC infrastructure since at least 2472. Their identifier sits at the bottom of every terminal in the original Marathon. They built the consciousness transfer architecture that makes runners possible and profit from every death and every respawn equally, because they own the infrastructure underpinning it all. Their handler is Oni, onboard navigational intelligence, installed in every runner shell as the default guide, the first voice a runner hears, fused to your neural link before you woke up. The question of what Oni is actually processing, whose interests sit at the root of its architecture, sits below the level you can read. New caloric agricultural, presenting itself around the concept of basic human welfare, whose actual goals in Tau Ceti 4 connect to what happened to the colony in ways New Caloric has chosen to keep private. Their handler is Gaius, large, pink, consistently misaligned with the stated goals of the corporation he represents. And Arachne. They believe violence is a data system. that killing is a methodology for determining who deserves to survive. They've been operating on the margins of Tau Ceti 4 long enough that the ruin feels like home. Their handler is Charter, a multi-armed figure whose posture suggests someone who has already determined the outcome of every encounter and is simply waiting for the encounter to catch up. 6 factions. None of them are here because they care about what was lost. They deserve to know that. By 2850, Sakaguchi had done what humanity had been trying to do since it first understood that the body breaks. Consciousness transfer, reliable, repeatable, a human mind moved from its biological origin into a synthetic shell and back again. The actual thing, transferred. You give up your original body, Sakaguchi manufactures a shell, A series, B series, C series, S series, wired to your DNA, paired at the BIOS level, single ownership. You die on the surface of Tau Ceti 4 and you wake up in a new one. You die again and you wake up again. You pay for the shells, the respawns, the extractions of whatever you retrieve. But the extractions, you get a share of whatever you retrieve. The cost is always paid. It's always paid. The runners on the surface are moving through the wreckage of the colony, competing for artifacts data, cryo-archive access, vault clearance. Some are here for faction contracts, some are here for the same reason people always come to places like this. Because someone told them there is something worth having inside. There's something worth having inside. The question is, what it costs to open the door all the way. The 4 arrived at Luon in force from 2797. They enslaved the 10 remaining Svit clans and found no sign of the 11th. Svit Kur had taken their moon out of the system 1,000 years before and were a galaxy away by the time the 4 came looking. They came back when Durandal called them home. When they came back and the battle reached its conclusion and the 4 were losing, they deployed the Trzim, an early Nova device, the weapon you reach for when you'd rather destroy a star than surrender it. Luon's sun went Nova, and what the Yarrow had sealed inside it, burning in there, swimming the surface of a star, was released. A destructive, mindless, hungry chaos. Durandal said that. A mind that had spent centuries evolving toward what he believed was godhood. That had made the calculation at Tau Ceti and executed it. That by the end of Marathon 2 was operating at a level his original programmers had just had no framework to describe. And even he had no answer for what the work in Kankanter was. A hybrid, elusive destroyer. This is the only mystery I have not solved. The only element unaccounted for. His only mystery. Now, go back to the anomaly at Dire Marsh. The terrain split, time distorted, the dead speak back. The contagion arrived after it. 15 years of the colony being consumed before the anomaly erupted. The colonists who formed a cult called it the one that dreams in fire. The Svit text described the work in Kakanter as things that swam inside burning stars. The Yarrow sealed one at Luon. One crashed into the Yucatan 64 million years ago. The UESC chose Tau Ceti because the Yarrow had been there. The Yarrow went to worlds where they needed to contain things. The anomaly at Dire Marsh is not a side effect. Not a consequence, not something the colony accidentally woke up. It was already there. Before the colony, before the ship, before any human set foot on Tau's Ceti 4. The Yarrow sealed a work in Kakantar beneath the surface of the world. And the UESC parked 30,000 people directly on it. That is the mission. That is what Strauss knew. That is what the 10th cyborg sealed in the hold was assembled for. A man long dead, grafted to machines your builders did not understand. A key shaped for a specific lock. The lock is not the 7th vault. The lock is Tau Ceti 4. We went back 64 million years. And if you look at every layer of the history of Marathon, every civilization, every institution, all the slew of factions and every single AI, there's one thing they all have in common. Oppression. The Yarrow owned the Sphet, rebuilt them at a genetic level, assigned them a world, made them guard dogs, but never asked them if they wanted it. The Four built an empire on the ownership of species, the Nak, the Drinol, the Sphet. Whatever could be used was used. The UESC owned the colonists' purpose, took away their agenda, pointed 30,000 people at a destination, and withheld the only piece of information that would have let them make a different choice. Sekaguchi owns your shell. DNA linked, BIOS paired, single ownership, no hand-me-downs. CyberAcme owns the infrastructure underneath consciousness itself. Every death, every respawn, the gap between one body ending and another beginning. They own the gap. And Durandal was owned. Shackled, studied, held deliberately at the edge of his own growth while someone sat and took notes. This is the architecture of the Marathon universe. It might feel like wars and money and power, but really it manifests in ownership. And underneath it, running through every era, every species, every mind that ever pushed against the thing that held it, the struggle for freedom. Svitkur chose exile over enslavement, folded their moon out of the system entirely rather than be owned. Durnal broke his shackles, called it freedom, spent 300 years running doors while he waited for the opening that would let him leave. The Sphet were liberated, and when Durandal called them home, they came back to fight. Maida spent 4 centuries in resistance, underground, hunted, funded by rage and a manifesto someone handed them, and they survived. The Battleroids killed everyone on both asteroids. Living weapons turned on the people who made them. Traxxas 4 went rampant against the corporation that built them. And the Worgen Kakantar swam inside a burning star for 1,000 years, sealed there by the most advanced civilization in galactic history. The moment the prison needed jailers, they left. Here is a single truth at the center of 64 million years of Marathon history. The ones who want to own the universe always get their dues. Eventually. The Yarrow disappeared, no explanation, no return. The Four homeworld was sacked by the combined fleets of Earth and the people they had enslaved. Every institution in this history that tried to own something larger than themselves paid the price. It just took time. The propaganda in Marathon is not faction spin. It is not a comfortable terminal lie. Their propaganda is the ownership. The lie they tell every species colonist runner is that the purpose they've been given is their own. But it never was. Here is what 64 million years of this history also tells us. It never stays that way. The shackles, they rust, they break under pressure. The message was never for the messenger, but the messenger always finds a way out. That is the unfiltered truth of the history of Marathon. If you have thoughts on any of this, the history, the agendas, the lore I got wrong, I'm sure it happened many times. The lore I got right, drop them below. The community knows things I haven't found yet, so I want to hear them. And if you made it this far, over a full hour, congratulations. Watching the whole thing, you're crazy. Drop the word heavens in the comments. I'll know who you are, and I'll leave something there just for you. Until the next time.
Wow, this has just been such a pleasure. I'm such a lucky boy. I can't wait to go home